welcome to this fireside chat with Deborah Leipziger, a co-committee member at the Rise World Summit after 2 years of participating and being a very core and important part of it. Deborah, you have been an author, a consultant, a poet, right? And have done so much work with entrepreneurs now. I think that's a diversity of both, I think, talent and interest. So tell us why this diversity, and how have you moved from writing books on corporate social responsibility, which we'll talk about very quickly later on, but from there to your work with words and now work with entrepreneurs. How do you really transition from this to where you are now?
It's a great question. And I was born in Brazil, and I've lived all over the world. And my parents come from, my father from Germany, my mother from Italy. And my family, my parents were refugees from Nazi Germany. And I think that experience of being a refugee and being welcomed by Brazil really shaped me, and from a very early age of both speaking many languages, right? So growing up in this family where we spoke Portuguese and Italian and English, and having a commitment to human rights, and also in Brazil, thinking about the environment and the rainforest, and looking for examples of people who had innovative ideas for addressing both human rights challenges and environmental challenges. And words, for me, I think, provide a lot of inspiration. I think learning words in new languages changes us. It makes us think in new ways, and we desperately need that. We need to come outside of the box that we live in, and one of the prisons or boxes that we have, I think, is language, because it's so stuck. And in many ways, in English, I can say, a lot of the language is racist, is old-fashioned and outdated. And I think to develop a paradigm of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurs especially, we need new ways of thinking, and that starts with language.
Yes, absolutely. And I think language, when we associate words, but language has got so many other connotations to it, including the visual space. And I think that's, again, something that you're trying to paint with words and also without. So let's go to your new book, your very much latest book, right? Story and Bone. Amazing title. How did you even, think of that? Where did
this is the book. It's been
show it again. I'm sure my our audience would like to see that. How nice. Thank
you. It's Story and Bone comes from some of the poems refer to Story and Bone, and the focus is on kind of finding home, creating home. So what is home? And for me, home has been very complicated, and in some ways is the whole world, right? In my work, I've traveled all over, and finding that integration of different parts of myself and my work. And I think the work in social innovation has been part of building that. And having friends like you and a network all over the world has given me a very rich sense of what is home, what is possible. And yeah, the title was a challenging part. I had many different titles until I came to Story and Bone.
Tell us some of those titles. What did you think?
Some of the other titles. I had the first title I had was Fiercely Gently.
Oh, Fiercely
which I still really like, but they were like, no adverbs. I like the word fierce, you know,
Yes.
we need to have a certain fierceness to do this work, right? That balance with the gentle. So that's what I call
beautiful. That's a very
lifetime.
beautiful contrast. I mean, fierce and gentle. And yes, I totally agree. You need to have balance in every single thing, and you need both sides of
You need both sides of it. Exactly. So I think, that the fierce being a kind of relentless commitment to the UN global goals, to the work that we're doing to promote diversity, human rights, equity. So I think that's the fierce part of it. But you also need the gentleness. So that is in some ways also a title that I have loved and used.
Great.
In a mantra, right?
Maybe the next book will be again on that.
Yes, I think
will
so.
be named on that. Great. So, again, you just spoke about the SDGs, you spoke about diversity, you spoke of human rights, and a lot of these issues today are becoming center stage, not just for the development world, but also for businesses.
Yes.
And you have been in that space for a very long time in terms of how you have been a consultant on corporate social responsibility. And in fact, you wrote that book also on the CSR code, I think, which was amazing. I mean, way before people really took CSR seriously, much before that. So maybe a little bit on that as to, how do you see this happening and how does the code really work for companies?
So I have the good fortune of being in this space for 30 years. So I feel very fortunate that I discovered very early on what I wanted to do. And I remember going to the library. I was at the time in Philadelphia, and I went to UPenn, their library, looking for books about corporate responsibility. And there were no books. I mean, there were lots of books about the bad things that companies do, and rightfully so, but there was nothing about corporate responsibility. And so I thought, okay, I'm an author, I'm a writer. This is a calling, right? This is something I want to do. And so I began and was fortunate to team up with wonderful authors in the UK and wrote one of the very first books about corporate responsibility and corporate citizenship. And it was very exciting. And it was the two of the other authors were academics. And so we were able to teach this work in business schools. And so it was very new. And then I began to work with companies in this space. And we had a grant from the European Commission to look at best practice of what companies could do to promote social and environmental practice. And it was very new and very exciting. And I still remember that we would have meetings, even of the UN Global Compact, and it would be, you could fit everybody in a room because there were like, 30, 40 people doing this work. So, and we've all become very close. So I was able, when I lived in Europe, to be part of some of the development of codes and standards, including Social Accountability 8000 and the Ethical Trading Initiative, and was also part of the development of the Global Compact and the Global Reporting Initiative. And I've advised a lot of initiatives and sector initiatives. And so it was an exciting time. And I wrote the code book, the Corporate Responsibility Code book, because I needed it. My clients would say, what's the difference between SA 8000 and AA 1000? And I needed to look things up. And so I thought, okay, if I need it, then other people need it too. And so that was a wonderful process. And we have 3 editions of it, and including an e-version, and there's a version for India. So I remember when Tata Publishing, when I heard from folks at Tata, and they called me and they said, we want a version for India. And if your publisher doesn't want to do it, then we have Tata Publishing. So I thought, okay, let's do it. So we made a version for India. And I think there's the whole field has evolved so much, but we still are, I would say, in the infancy. We're still so early. I joke that we're in kindergarten in this field. It's only the beginning of what we could be doing and what we should be doing.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think the language piece is so important, because we first need to learn a new language to be able to even communicate this work.
Absolutely. And, as you said, we're still taking baby steps. People are still getting to understand, even after, as you said, 30 years of being in the sector. And, very often we keep getting new words, we get new acronyms. And today, of course, ESG, DI, all these it's become an alphabet soup, as they keep talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see, and, as you know, this year, the theme for the Rise World Summit is actually purpose, profit, and peace. And corporate social responsibility is an outcome of profit, so to speak, or that's what people think, while ESG is about, purpose before you can get your profit, right? So how do you see all this alphabet soup kind of really steaming up the whole, sector, so that we actually grow and not just stay still in kindergarten?
It's a good question. And I think that so much of the language, I feel, is frozen. It's not alive. It's not inspiring. And I feel, so many companies are saying, okay, we want to do something, right? Anything. And I find it very frustrating, because I think it's for me, the social entrepreneurs who are driving the change, that have ideas of paradigm shift and new ways of being, new markets, new products, new systems. And many times that is also a shift in vocabulary. So I think the social entrepreneurs are in the lead. And I think it's really important that we listen to the social entrepreneurs and sometimes social entrepreneurs inside companies too. But I find, listening to a lot of the corporations that, they're somewhere stuck 10 years ago. And I often hear, we want to look like we're doing something, and it's like, well, the best way to look like you're doing something is to actually do something, right? But so I enjoy my work with social entrepreneurs and training social entrepreneurs. And I was for 3 years a judge for the Meaningful Business 100. And that's a great source of really interesting innovations, especially in the small and medium-sized enterprises that the MB100 have found in different parts of the world. So I think that way of creating, new types of food, right? New types of raw material, using waste, to make clothing, making clothing that's compostable. So these are the kinds of cutting edge innovations that I think are really exciting, and that are generative, because I think so much of the business world is extractive, right? And we're seeing that with people burning out, people resigning, this idea that we need generative and regenerative practices. So I think that you asked about language. I think the term generative and regenerative are really important terms for the kinds of transitions that we need to.
That's a great segue to the lexicon that you have worked on so much. I mean, it was amazing. And then, of course, the launch at the Nature of Cities. Tell us a little bit about that work of yours, which is just, incredible. I can't even believe that you do research so deeply into words of this kind. But please, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was wonderful having you there for our launch early last year in the spring at the Nature of Cities Festival. I still remember it very well. And kind of like the code book and other books that I've written, I need this lexicon, right? I am constantly finding new words, discovering vocabulary that I think, okay, well, this crystallizes something. There is wisdom here. And many times the words are new, but other times they're not, you know, so terms from Gandhi, terms from indigenous cultures that we have forgotten. I was talking with a Brazilian environmentalist a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, Rubens Born, an Ashoka fellow, and he was saying, you know, we here in São Paulo, we have all these names, indigenous names of the river, of the Rio Tietê. We don't even know what that means. Like we have these names and we don't know the meaning of it. And I think it's very poignant for me. You know, we've lost a lot of language that we don't know, we don't remember, we don't honor, we don't even understand. So I think part of the environmental movement is reaching into indigenous language to help us think in new ways that are interconnected. And I think a lot of the terms from science. So I think there are a lot of wonderful environmental terms around climate change that we need to learn. So we can't use the same vocabulary from the past to create the future that we want. We need a new vocabulary. We need to be conscious.
Absolutely. And sometimes I feel, you know, the nuanced use of words, sometimes say, oh, it's just a play, you know, it doesn't really matter. It just means the same, but actually it does not, right? I mean, so many words have such a nuanced way of being looked at that if you do not use the right word, it doesn't really get the right kind of response either. So I think that's a lesson I've learned, and talking to you, that has helped me to just reinforce my use of language better, thanks to you. So thank you very much. And you know, this kind of takes us back to your work that you just mentioned with entrepreneurs. And I think that's wonderful to know that someone who works with words, with books, and then with companies, and now working with young social entrepreneurs. How is that work, you know, kind of getting related to what you've been doing in the past, but also kind of creating new pathways for the future?
Well, one of the things I love doing is teaching. I love teaching, and I think one of the things I realized is business schools are not yet equipped to teach this work. And so one of the great joys that I have is to work with universities to create curriculum and to create case studies. So I've written a number of case studies of social enterprises, of social entrepreneurs, and I think it's absolutely fascinating to work with students, to work with social entrepreneurs, and I also work with companies. And the lexicon is a big part of that, is how do we change our mindset? And one of the things I have my students do is to create their own lexicon of terms. Because once you start to think about it, you realize how this language is everywhere, and it's a question of paying attention. And I think it also activates a creative part of the brain of listening and interpreting and saying, okay, well, what are areas where we don't have language, or what are terms from science or art or other, what languages do I know where there's some wisdom, and to bring that in. And the idea for the lexicon is that it is very much crowdsourced. So it's something alive and dynamic, in flux that people can contribute. And so I love, students contacting me and saying, oh, I have a new word, or former students reaching out. But this project sorry, it looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, then I would like to encourage our audience, if they know of a new word, or they know of a word that they believe has a lot of value, in terms of what it could mean to make behavior change, to change mindsets, to create a better, insightful, more, valuable way of looking at things. Please, you know who to go to and where to get that word popularized. So please
Absolutely.
share this with
Yes.
Deborah. We'd be very happy to share it with her. And of course, hopefully add it to your lexicon. So just wanted
Thank you. Thank you. And I came to Mumbai right before the pandemic burst open at the end of February. And I think now 3 years ago. And so I gave a talk at the Institute of Directors conference on the lexicon and on language. And everyone said to me, oh, where's your blog? I want to read your blog. So I started a blog about language that you can access through the Institute of Directors, the IOD India. And I love doing that. And so that's a way to follow. I try and do it monthly, but that's a great way to look at some of the terms that I'm coming across and people are sharing. Is a great way of being up to date with that. And I'm in the process of creating a database that people can search. What are terms relating to forests? What are terms relating to geography or sectors, to clothing, and different areas or different languages as well. So to be able to tag that.
I think that would be amazing, because I think just like dictionaries have become almost second nature to us for, checking up on the meaning of words, etc. I think also having them in this kind of category, the way you are putting it across in the lexicon, I think would be such a valuable tool. And I hope more and more of our audience, as well as, the community that we are building, will definitely go ahead and have a look at this and benefit from it. I can be sure that it'll be of great value for sure. So
thank you.
We'll encourage everybody to do that. Yeah.
And I love to learn. So I think, I love learning new words. It's always a good day if I've learned a new word.
Wow, that's an amazing attitude. Absolutely. A learner's attitude, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I think, to really kind of close the 4 parts of what you have been working on, I think is the biodiversity part. And the work that you've done in the textile industry, as well as other, aspects of sustainability. I think it'll be really amazing to understand how that has kind of transformed the work that you're doing, starting with CSR, as I said, and working with entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, and now, of course, looking at climate and sustainability. Yeah.
And I wanted just to share one thought about the RISE Summit, which is I love, to your question that you had posed, I love the terms purpose, profit, and peace as your tagline. And I'm really grateful that you chose peace, because I think peace gets forgotten a lot, and people don't talk about peace. And so I think that's a brave word in our world, sadly, these days. So I think,
in fact, I think people don't even understand peace in its practical form. We think of it as a very esoteric term, and we think of it more in terms of either war at one extreme,
right,
or we talk of it as this meditative practice. We just don't seem to think of it as an everyday need or something that makes sense to us at a very practical, harmonious level, that what we want, stable environment kind of approach. So thank you very much for saying that.
I think it's a great example of the power of language to shape a conversation, and well done for choosing that.
Thank you very much. It means a lot for sure. Yeah. So again, to go back to, as I said, about biodiversity and sustainability, your work with the textile industry, how does that kind of work, and where have that taken you as well? Yeah.
Well, I think it's the biodiversity area is one that really fascinates me, and I think it's one of the areas where it's useful to talk about language, because to think about biodiversity, we need to understand science, and these terms from science are something we should teach from a young age, right? So we need to become more like scientists. And just to give an example of one of the lexicon terms around biodiversity that I think is so important. So one of the concepts that from the lexicon that comes from science is the idea of bioregions. And so we are set up as countries and cities, but nature is not like that. So nature has its own geography and follows bioregions. So these are regions that have the same biology, the same type of natural systems. And so I think that shift is an example of thinking in new ways. So we have political systems and economic systems of countries and cities, but we need collaborative ways of co-creating within bioregions. So I think that's I think an important orientation around biodiversity that's key. And another term that I wanted to share around biodiversity that I learned and I thought, oh, is just such a frightening and unforgettable concept is the word Endling. So an Endling is the last of its species, the last bird of its species. And so we're at that point where, and we have been, where we're losing species, and we even have, sadly, names for those last of its kind. And so that's, I think, an example of how language shifts. And when you think about that, the sadness of that, when you have a term for the last of its species, you realize the kind of peril that we're in. And it brings it home in a way that isn't real to those of us, living in cities. So that's an example of a word from the lexicon that's inspired me to write a poem about that, because I think it's often through poetry, art, music that these environmental concepts hit us deeply as humans, right? Not just as entrepreneurs or as citizens, but deeply in the heart. So that I think is a big part of the work of the lexicon, and I think also of the UN Global Goals to bring art, music, writing, poetry to these challenges, so that we can orient people in new ways to this work.
You use two words side by side, which is citizens and entrepreneurs. And as you know, IDOBRO works in these three verticals, which is citizenship, entrepreneurship, and the last is what you are saying we should be doing, which is partnership, right? We need to have more of that. And so thank you for bringing that out, because I think it's so important, and it's something that is really something that is not just professionally critical, which is of course it is in part of our work, but also personally, which is what the Rise World Summit is all about. And that's the ethos with which we started that 10 years ago. So can't believe it's already 10 years.
Is it really? Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think, these three verticals of ours is really what you're pointing to. And that's where we started the whole RISE value co-creation framework, based on these exact things. And I hope you will, of course, be there, but I also hope that our audience and communities, do join us in those roundtables, because that's what we're going to start exploring. How do you co-create value, and how do you actually look at the value-based leadership decisions that need to be taken? How do you look at your business operations, whether it is policies, whether it is partnerships, whether it is procurement, or then of course, practices that we follow. So I think all these are really important things. And of course, we will have a lot of unpacking to be done at the summit. But yes, and I think you have helped to contribute to that. And I think, the word, when you use Endling and you explained it, I think, as you said rightly, it's no longer professional. It becomes personal. It becomes emotional, And honestly, I almost had goosebumps listening to you. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I really did not even know. And I think it's work like yours that really help people get in touch with the human side of our world, which we tend to be more and more distant with, thanks to our crazy lives that we lead, I think. So thank you very much for really making that connect for us. Thank you for showing how it is so possible that you can be a creative person, but think absolutely from a business sense with corporate CSR and story and bone, right?
Story and bone, exactly. There we go.
Fierceness and gentleness. So I think, listening to you today, Deborah, has been absolutely a treat, I'm sure, for all of us. And not just a treat that makes you feel satisfied, but also makes you go away wanting for more. And I think that's really what I think has been the end feeling with which I'm going, because I know I'm going, even though I already know about the lexicon, even though I know all about your books, I think I'm going to go back and do a reread and relook, because I'm sure you've got many more new words which I don't know about. And yes, I would also like to learn and keep learning. So thank you so much for joining with us. And yes, if there's any last words that you have or last thoughts you want to share, please.
I would love to share the lexicon as we have it. If there's a resource page for the event, for the summit, that people can look up. So far it's alphabetical, but one of my goals for this year is to tag the terms so that it's searchable and be able to make it interactive.
Nice. Of course, yes, very definitely. We have the resource bank, and I'm very sure, again, we hope all our participants have been able to go there, check it out, and of course, we'll find your lexicon over there and come back to you with new words. So that
yes, please, and especially I think from other languages.
Right.
And I think I should just close by emphasizing that the idea is not to create just one definition, because sometimes there are a multiplicity of views, and that's okay, but to know where we differ, because I think one of the problems that we have in reporting of companies reporting is sometimes companies or others use words and they think they know what it means, but it's not necessarily defined in the way that a scientist might use it. So understanding where we have language gaps, where the understanding is potentially unclear.
Well, thank you once again. I'm sure this is going to help us fine-tune our language skills and add to more. And we look forward to hearing from you again and seeing you at other roundtables and listening to you more and more. Thank you.
Absolutely. And best of luck with the summit. I'm very excited.
Thank you.